This live stream is brought to you by Still and Evergreen Garden Care. Still is Australia's most trusted brand of garden power tools, backed by 95 years of German engineering excellence. To get your hands on their range, visit your local Still dealer today or visit still.com.au. Evergreen Garden Care and their market-leading brands are some of the best-known and trusted consumer brands within the garden care market. To be inspired and easily create and maintain your garden, head to lovethegarden.com.
Garden Express are Australia's leading mail-order gardening service, offering a wide range of quality garden products. Each week on the Garden Gurus Live, the team at Garden Express will share a weekly offer. So make sure after today's show you jump online and visit their website.
Hello, good morning to you. Welcome to the Garden Gurus Live. I'm Trevor Cochrane. It's great to be with you today. We have got a fantastic show for you today. A bit later on, my good friend Richard Dekkers from Floraplant will be joining us, and he is an absolute gun when it comes to indoor plants. He probably grows a large proportion of the ones that are actually seen in garden centres all over the country. Now, during this segment, we'll have some prizes to give away. This is your chance to get your hands on some packet seeds, which we will share with you. And it's five. So it's the five best questions or comments about your indoor plants. And I'll show you why I wanted to catch up with Richard as well, because we've just done something pretty special with our indoor plant wall, and I'll allude to that a bit later on. I'll be sharing my plant of the week with you this week. It's going to deliver a lot of colour. Michaela's just jumped in now, so I don't know whether you're aware, but pretty much all of us over here in the West at the moment are wearing masks, and that's because obviously we have had what everybody seems to be experiencing, another bit of a COVID outbreak over here, and it's a bit distracting. So that's the seed, so make sure you get your questions in when we catch up with Richard. Probably the most important thing to do is to make sure that you tell us where you're from when you're asking your questions. So post them online. Let us know where you're from, that is what state, ideally what town. That will help a lot with regards to identifying what your garden problem or issue may be and how I can help you solve that. Of course, a bit later on, we've also got our Garden Express deal for you this week. It is an absolute doozy. One of my favourite plants, something that you will just love. So keep your eye out for that. And I've got a copy of this book, The Rose, which is absolutely fabulous. It was written by Nev Passmore and myself, along with contributions from people like David Austin, who is, and Anthony Tesla, who are obviously world leaders when it comes to roses and breeding and knowledge. And it's all about the latest and greatest roses from that period in time. So there'll be one winner of that. And don't forget, always hit the like button. Let everybody know let us know, most importantly, what you're enjoying. Now, the whole purpose of being here, of course, is to answer your questions. And the very first question we have came from Brian, and it's a picture which I'm sure you'll be able to see coming up on the screen. It's an interesting problem. He wants to know what the plant is and what's causing the issue. This is actually a plant known as Pittosporum. It's a native plant. And that blemish that you're seeing, that damage to the leaves, is caused by the Pittosporum beetle. So the treatment of that is a classic bug spray. So any of the bug sprays, Baythroid being one that is quite effective as well. But it does take them out. The only thing is that there's no point in doing anything at the moment. Those leaves will have to fall off. New leaves will have to begin. So trimming the plant is a good way to go. Mandy is in Curram Downs in Victoria, and I actually assume that I think that the Pittosporum that Brian talked about is probably from Victoria too. Mandy is in Curram Downs, and where's the best place to plant a camellia in your garden? Well, I can just show you. I've been in my garden this morning. This was my plant of the week. I'll talk to you about it a bit later on. They don't have a big root system. That's the first thing you should be aware of. They take a while to establish, but they do have a fairly solid root system around the outside. So it's best not to have competition around the outside of your camellias. Give them a bit of room. The best place to plant one, well, if you want them to be able to be moved around, then In a pot, that's a good way to go. If it's in the garden, then a semi-shaded position in the hotter states, and in the cooler states, they can go into full sun. So in Carrum Downs, you will not have a problem with most camellia types planted out in full sun. Leanne is from the northern suburbs of Melbourne, from Doreen, and she needs advice on tidying up her wisteria after the next flower. So I'm not quite sure what she means by that, but which branches are best to remove, and will new growth come from the main trunk, which I can see from your picture is going to need to get some growth coming out. And the answer is yes. If you prune the branches off the top, all those little smaller thin branches, it's going to encourage growth from the bottom for sure. Not off the main trunk, but certainly off the branching stems, those laterals that start to come out from there. But what I would do is I'd remove it all off the top and I would thin it back. The best flowers will come from what we call semi-hardwood. So it's a slightly thicker, so probably about my little finger in thickness. And what you'll see buds emerge from the growth buds will emerge from the nodes on that, where the leaves and everything else will grow later on. So trim it back down, keep it to probably probably just looking at that plant, I would say you probably want to take about 20% of the wood off, and just keep it sort of pulled back. So don't let it grow too much. Best time to prune wisterias is actually in the summer. So after they've finished flowering, give them a prune again in the early summer, and it'll stimulate some more growth and more flowering. Hope that helps, Leanne. I know I sort of stumbled through that one a little bit. But Jill, we're not sure where you're from, but you've got an Abyssinian banana. Now, it's an ornamental banana, and sometimes people call them banana palms, but they're not a palm. It's produced a large flower, which you've removed. Will the palm die now, or can I save it? It was spectacular, and it's only 4 years old. This is the thing with Abyssinians, in fact, with all bananas, is that, yes, it will... unfortunately, once it's flowered, it will die back. That main trunk will die off, but it will produce some suckers around the base, and that's your new plant. So don't be worried about that. You've taken the flower off. It'll probably keep the plant looking a bit more healthy for a while, but eventually it will die back, and that's when those suckers will start to emerge from the bottom. And what I would do is I'd remove, if there's 4 of them, I'd remove 2 and just leave 2, so you end up with 2 nice big plants. Jody is from New Mexico and New South Wales. You're growing ivy geraniums in hanging pots. How do I keep them thick and healthy? They seem to grow well over the side, and they get too long and heavy and break off or die. The trick with any of the ivy leaf geraniums is that you just keep trimming them. In fact, if you trim them in and around the pot, you'll end up with a lot of growth like that, and then you can let some runners hang down a little bit. But the majority of that growth you do want to keep sort of compacted back to the actual container itself, to the outside edges. Don't be scared to trim them. They love it. It does them the world of good. And a little tip for you, when you have trimmed them, give them a feed. A little bit of controlled release fertilizer is a good way to go straight after you've given them a prune. Barry's in Success, which is in WA, and my Stephanotis. It's an interesting way of spelling it on the on the email in, but on your message in. But it's got 2 seed pods. Now they look a bit like, and a lot of people write in and say, I think I've got an avocado growing, because they look just like avocados, the seed pods. One is still growing, the other one's half the size of the growing one. The smaller one has just dried up and opened. My question is, the seeds are flat and wrinkled. Is this normal, or are they immature? And the answer is nope. They're meant to be flat and wrinkled, and basically, as long as they're dry, they can be replanted, and you'll end up with more. Tan is in Melbourne. Hello, Tan. I'd like to know if anyone has solutions to revive your mandarin tree. Now, we can see the picture of the mandarin tree, and Tan, I had this happen with an orange tree a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, there is nothing going to bring that tree back. That is, it's game over for that. What's caused it is the interesting thing, and sometimes it's a collar rot in around the base of the trunk at soil level. And it's a very important lesson to make sure that we keep soil pulled away from the base of the trunk of trees, because if you get collar rot, it eats through the cambium layer, and effectively it's starved off the whole tree. and that is exactly what it appears like, a root rot of some sort or a collar rot. So I would take that out. I wouldn't plant another tree in the exact same spot, but probably a metre or two on either side. You should be fine. But that tree's got to go, I'm afraid, Tan. It is dead. Keith is from Moorebank in New South Wales. Hello, Keith. You've got a bay leaf tree and you've got, small round brown spots on the leaves. And you're not sure what they are. Is there something you can use to get rid of them? The answer is it is scale, and it's quite common with bay leaf. And the best way to get rid of it is to use a horticultural oil. So eco oil, white oil, any of those will do the job for you. Carolyn is in Sutherland in New South Wales. Gee, we've got some questions flying through. We've got Richard Dekkers coming up very soon, so we'll be chatting to him. But I'll answer a couple more questions for you. Carolyn is in Sutherland, New South Wales. Lots of marigolds, and you'd like to save the seed. Can I reuse it now, or do I have to store it? Do I also pull the old marigolds up? Well, if the marigolds are dying off, then the answer is yes, it's time to take them out. And that is the time to collect those seed heads, pop them into a paper bag, and let them dry out. I'd leave them for a good month in a cool spot. Usually the garden shed's not a bad place. Hang them up so it's nice and airy and there's a bit of air movement going through. Those seeds will then be okay to replant. You do get a bit of variation, so you might find that the plants, when they regrow, are not exactly the same as the ones that you had before. But experience has always said that when a plant has gone into seed, when it's grown, and then it goes into seed and produces seed, the next generation basically it has effectively, the DNA has been adjusted to adapt to your environment. So those seeds will grow a lot better. And often, if you can get 2 or 3 generations, you'll find they'll start to self-seed thereafter. So this is all about the evolution of plants. They can change quite quickly and adapt to the new environment they're in quite quickly. But the old ones, take them out. Scott is in Ipswich in Queensland. Hi, Scott. How long does geofabric last in raised garden beds? It's a pretty good question. It should last for about 10 years. Geofabric is generally made of a non-organic material that won't break down. There are some organic versions of them made out of coir, and they tend to be about a 2 or 3 year lifespan before they start breaking down. But there is a synthetic form of geofabric, and pretty much it'll be there for at least 10 years. So it's just a case, keep your eye on it, Scott. The geofabric's designed usually as a barrier to stop weeds coming through. I'm sure that's what Scott's up to. Sue, we're not sure where you're from. How can I get rid of onion weed? This is a universal problem. Best thing to do is to smother it out. So if you've got newspaper, wet it all down, lay it over the top. Some of that organic geofabric, so the coir geofabric, you can get quite a thick layer of that and lay it over the top, and then mulch on top of that, and it'll smother the onion weed out. It's very, very rare that synthetic or even contact herbicides will work with onion weed, because it's got a fine hair on the outside of the leaf, and they run off, and it's not absorbed into the actual into the tissue of the plant. Anthony is in Greenbank in Queensland. Any idea of what's causing brown spots on your Licuala elegans? A Licuala is a beautiful, and elegans in particular, is a beautiful palm, and it's fabulous indoors. Now, brown spots on it could be one of two things. One is it could be damage to the actual tissue, or it could be scale. And I can't tell you which one it is, but I can give you a couple of tips. If it's brown spots occurring, it's more likely because the plant's getting too much water. So if it's sitting in a tray, that's usually an indication of root damage. If it is a lump brown spot and you squeeze it and there's a yellow liquid comes out of it, that is scale. That's an insect. And in a potted plant, the easiest way to get rid of it is to literally physically remove it, so to wipe it off. If it is a large palm, and generally they're not that large, you might need to treat it. And you can again do that using white oil or horticultural oil. Kelly is in Collie. Kelly from Collie, hello, in WA. Fallen in love with Heucheras, which is a beautiful foliage plant. They okay to plant out in the garden. In Collie, it might be a little bit too cold for them, but they do actually prefer the cool to the heat. So they're a good plant to put in, say, underneath the shade of a tree, a particular evergreen tree. What tends to happen is they do get affected quite badly by snails and slugs. So you'll be constantly treating those because you don't want the foliage to be damaged. But yeah, they're a beautiful plant. They do grow indoors quite well. Roz is in the Blue Mountains. Hi, Roz. It's great to have you back with us again this week. When's the best time to prune a waratah? Well, the general rule of thumb is you'll only prune them after they've flowered. So, one little word of warning is don't prune them too hard if you're going to prune them. They can be quite fickle. Beautiful plant though, absolutely gorgeous, and they tend to do really, really well only in New South Wales and that high country. There are some places in Victoria where they do particularly well, but I've had them in my garden and they really struggle over here in the West. So, and a lot of that's got down to soil-based bacteria. Now, we did talk about catching up with Richard Dekkers from Floraplant. Richard's the managing director of Floraplant. They're a massive nursery growing some of the most spectacular indoor plants. And I wanted to show you our living wall here in the office and give you the whole reason behind why we're catching up with Richard, because they are absolutely, this is one of those things, they're absolutely brilliant indoor plants to clean the air, but they can also look spectacular as well. So we went off to Richard and we said, Richard, we're looking for some colourful indoor plants. And those colourful indoor plants, I think I'm going to be able to show you, look a bit like this. And maybe I can show you. Jimmy's working hard to get it up for us. But it's such a feature statement that, just so you understand why it's so important in our work environment, is because what happens with these is that they clean the air. They actually take a lot of the pollutants that we find in the air, and you can see the colour there now. So I rang Richard up and I said, Richard, I'm looking for some stunning indoor plants to put in our living wall, and I want to make a bit of a statement. And this was the result, and you can see it. So let's have a chat to Richard. I think he's out in the nursery as we speak. G'day, mate. How are you going?
Yeah, not too bad. Yourself?
Yeah, good, good. Whereabouts are you? You in the glass house?
Yeah, I'm in the orchid house, so I picked a nice warm spot today.
It has been a bit cool in the mornings. Does that affect the plants out there?
It doesn't really, because we're fully climate controlled. So the
Yep.
orchid house, for example, will hold about 25 degrees out here when it was 1 degree the other day. So it's
Right.
this is where we all run and hide in the morning.
Yeah, absolutely. So just on that, what's the optimum temperatures for people when they're growing indoor plants? Would you recommend as a general comment?
Look, as a general comment, most of our indoor plants like it around the 15 to 20 degrees minimum.
Yep.
But orchids, obviously, the house I'm in now, we want to keep it a little bit warmer than that, and around 25. They will tolerate lower. Lower temperatures is obviously what flowers an orchid,
Yep.
but you don't want to maintain a low temperature on it.
Okay, that's an interesting thing. I've got to point this out. We're going to ask people if they would like to ask questions, and if you ask a question or tell us about your favourite indoor plant, you'll be in the running to win some of these packet seeds. Now, Richard, just talk me through these. I suppose the indoor plants that you would suggest are indestructible, the best ones for people who've never really grown plants before.
Okay. Look, the most indestructible indoor plant is going to be a Zanzibar gem. Now
Yep.
these come in about 3 or 4 different forms now. So we have the black leafed Zanzibars, which we have Jungle Warrior, but we've also got a nice new compact one, which is called Zinzi. I've got a big plant here in the background just to show you the difference. So a big ZZ plant doesn't quite
Yeah.
has really large internodes, whereas you can see this one is very thick and very stacked
Yep.
on top of each other. So this is a great one for indoor use. Apart from that, we've got things like Spadophilium, great indoor plants. If you want some colour, obviously we have orchids, anthuriums.
Yep.
They're the go-tos for indoor colour, if you want
Yep.
colour, so to speak. And then we go down to things like philodendrons, and then you're starting to look at your variegations. That's what people are chasing. Your devil's ivy, your syngoniums, and things like that.
Okay. All right. One of the things that I've noticed is things like syngoniums, in particular, Dieffenbachia, those kinds of plants. They go really well, but if it gets too cold, if they're in a cool spot in the house, or if it's too dark, they can really start to deteriorate quite quickly. So, what's the ideal growing conditions? Let's say we're in winter now, which we are obviously, and we're in a situation where we've got some warmer windows. Let's say a north-facing window. Is that where those kinds of plants can go? But the ZZ plant, which is almost indestructible, can be down in the darker corner of the house. Is that the trick?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. That is the trick. So ZZ plant you can put anywhere, and like you say, this time of year, find that north-facing window, get that warm sun on the plants. The sun's not intense enough to hurt the plant, and they'll thrive there. And not only that, you'll allow the soil to dry as it's heating up the pot. The soil will dry more consistently, which is a
Mm.
lot better for the plant. They carry on when they're sometimes too wet, too long, and too cold.
Now, I'm going to ask Jimmy to put some photos up of some of the plants, some close-up photos of our living wall. The plants that you've sent us were really really quite stunning in their colour. I think we've got a little bit of a technical issue. Richard, could I just ask you to connect your link for us, and we'll come
Yeah,
back to
okay. Okay.
you. All right, thank you. Now, so the indoor plants that we've got in our living wall that Richard sent through, you can have a look here. There's a bunch of them in there, but in particular the orchids, the Phalaenopsis orchids, and these are sort of dwarf forms of them, are just stunning. They really are beautiful. And they come in a wide range of colours, whites and pinks predominantly. Um, the ones that I'm really wrapped with at the moment, that have really done such a good job, are the anthuriums. Now you can see in the far right of screen, above the still logo, you'll see that there's some flowers there. They're called the flamingo flower, and they've got those beautiful bright red flowers. But they also come in pinks and whites, and they are just gorgeous. And the last one on the very bottom, these are bromeliads, and bromeliads are also plants that perform exceptionally well and provide you with foliage colour variation. They, for me, have been like one of the great revelations in an indoor environment in a living wall. Living walls, Richard, they seem to have quite a different requirement, I think, to general house plants in pots as well.
It's minimal water as well, which is what you're looking for. But yeah, look, you're picking the plants that are epiphytes and things like that like to live around the trees or the bottom of trees or in the tops of trees, which is
Yeah.
ideal.
Mate, can I ask you? I think when I talk to people, generally when they've got a problem and they're asking about it, um, the and they sort of they'll tell me what the issue is, and it's usually one of two things. It's either too much water or not enough water. What's the ideal watering? What do you guys do in the nursery?
Look, this time of year we're using very little water. So inside the house at the moment, you're going to have your heaters on during the day or before you go to bed, but you're going to let it cool down. So watering wise, inside the house right now, I barely water once a week.
Yep.
And I'd water very minimally because you don't want to soak that soil. You just want to give
Yep.
the plants enough to evaporate what it needs to evaporate for the week.
Okay.
So that would be my way of looking at it. I always like to try and put myself into plant shoes and think like a plant and look at your
Yep.
environment, feel your environment, and say, okay, it's definitely cooled down. I don't need as much.
You know, it's an interesting thing. I was talking to a friend the other day, and he's explaining that if you actually look at your plants, if they'll tell you basically what the problem is. Usually, they'll give you some pretty good indications. One of the things that we're getting a lot of people talk about at the moment, with some of the bigger leafed indoor plants, is this issue of sort of dry patches on the outside of leaves or some dry spots. A lot of that's got to do with the fact that we're running dry heat inside our houses as well. Does it benefit indoor plants? Do you think when you're in that situation, you've got the heater going, that that they misted, or because do you guys use a misting kind of watering system there?
Yeah, we're still running foggers here, even during the day. So especially in these sort of tropical houses where we have anthuriums, spadophiliums, and things like that. So yeah, we are lifting the humidity. Good scenario would be a bathroom this time of year. If it's a north-facing bathroom, even better, because you'll get the humidity off your shower and things like that for those type of plants. But yeah, you will get a little bit of drying of the edges this time of year.
Yep. So I'm going to point this out again because we're getting questions coming through now, which is great. And I've got one for you in a second from Liz. But don't forget, folks, ask your question. You're in the running to win some packet seeds. So it's Andrew's basically told us that his favourite indoor plant is mother-in-law's tongue. Scott says he's got a ZZ gem. It's a jungle gem. And Liz has asked a really interesting question, Richard, and I don't know what the answer is, but do we know if Zanzibar gem are toxic to cats who have a bit of
Uh,
sounds like her cat has a bit of a tendency to chew on the indoor plants.
that's a very good question. I'm not going to say I'm not 100% sure.
One of the things that I do say to most people is that pretty much, unless a plant is declared that it's edible, work on the theory that it's toxic. And so many plants are actually toxic that we actually enjoy. So tomato is a good example where the leaf, the stem, the roots, they're all toxic, but the fruit is delicious and good for us. So
Yeah,
unless it's declared something to eat, I would keep the cat away from it. And there are a few ways that you can deter cats from going near indoor plants. And one of the simple ones to do is to use white pepper. So they've got very sensitive noses, as do dogs. And by just dusting them with a little bit of white pepper, the cat will be sneezing before it's chewing on the plant. So there's a little tip anyway. But I didn't know the answer to that one either, Richard. We've both got a bit of research to do, I think.
yeah, I think so. A bit of googling.
Yeah. Daniel's from Bendigo, and he's asked, is Devil's Ivy best on a shelf or hanging from the ceiling in the bathroom?
Look, I think it'll perform the best in the bathroom, but
Yep.
it does make a great shelf plant as long as it's in the right spot as well. I've got them at home personally on top of shelves, and they go brilliantly there. So a little bit of self preference there, but I think bathroom always with that extra bit of humidity there is going to be a better environment.
Yeah, in fact, Daniel's question is a really good one, and somebody's raised this as well. But um, Devil's Ivy is a good example of an indoor plant that it's called Devil's Ivy because if you chew on it, you hallucinate, and people were seeing the devil. So that's how it got its little name. It is toxic. It's probably only mildly toxic, but it's still toxic. Another one that has a horrendous history, really, is Dieffenbachia, which comes from Africa. And the traders, when they were literally kidnapping human beings and shipping them across for slavery, would chop the Dieffenbachia stems up into small pieces and make them chew on it. And this would cause your tongue to swell up and stop you being able to communicate. So there was less chance of ever being some kind of riot on the boat on the way over if people were able to fight back. It's a horrible story, but it's a good lesson in that these plants, they're not designed to eat; they're designed to look good inside.
Yeah, that's it. Look. At the end of the day, for us, it's an ornamental plant, and that's what we call them. They're there to look good. It's there for its aesthetics.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think we've got quite. But just ask you, just with regards to indoor plants, and we've talked about some flowering ones and obviously some foliage ones, but particularly the orchids. A lot of people are asking the question with Phalaenopsis, when it's finished flowering, do I cut the stem off or do I leave the stem on?
Look, you can cut with an orchid. You can cut above its node. So if we look at this one, for example, so its last node is here. We can cut on this node just here. I don't know if you can see that
Yep,
node just there.
yep,
And 9 out of 10 times, it will throw a new shoot coming from that node there. If that doesn't happen, it's not the 9 out of 10 times, then yes, the best is to cut it back at the base.
okay. And
Okay.
it'll just produce a new flower next year. What triggers the
Yeah. So
flowering process?
an orchid needs a winter, so it needs to sit a natural winter. So the best thing in Perth is to actually bring it outside for June, July.
Hmm.
Keep it under the patio. Obviously, you don't want frost and you don't want rain and that sort of thing. So
Yep,
up against the wall, under the patio, 8 weeks outside in winter, and you
yep,
will see a new eye come from the bottom. And then bring it back in, put it in a nice northern-facing window where it's nice and warm, and that
yep.
stem will rise up, and you'll get a nice flower like this.
That's brilliant, mate. Look, thanks very much. I've got my mate Gary Shannon's tuned in as well. I know he's a massive orchid fan. He's got a house full of them, and he's got a real green thumb as well. So it's good to see we're getting a good mixture of people tuning in today. Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. I'm going to move on because we're getting lots and lots of questions flowing through from all over the country. But thanks for your time, Richard. Appreciate it. And thanks for the plants for the wall.
Yeah, no worries at all. Happy to help.
You're a good man. See ya.
Cheers, mate.
All right. Now let's keep moving through and having a bit of a look. Christine's favourites: anthuriums, devil ivies, the silver swords, Swiss cheese plant, the mini monstera, golden pothos, and spathiphyllum. She's got them all inside. This is great, and it's a really good example of some of the diversity of the types of plants you can have. We've still got 1 of 5 packets of seeds. So tell us your favourite indoor plant. Tell us why you love it, and you'll be our winner. And I know Michaela's got that list of people there for us. So we've just about given away all the packet seeds. Daniel is from Bendigo and he's tuning into us from YouTube. G'day, Daniel. You've got baby snails eating your lemon tree leaves. Is there something you can spray on the trees to remove the snails? Look, any of the copper-based sprays will knock snails back. They're mollusks and they've got no tolerance to copper at all. So that's probably my simplest thing. There is a spray for the little tiny coastal snails called Mesurol. It's something you can use. It is a toxic chemical, so please be careful when you're applying it. You would only really do it if you are in real dire straits, but if you've got them to the point where they're chewing on lemons leaves, that's pretty bad. So maybe try the copper spray first. Then if you need to go to Mesurol, you can. Remember, hit the like button, folks, if you like what we're doing. Benjamin is from Newcastle. He's tuning in again on YouTube. So we're getting a few coming through on YouTube. When's the best time of the year to do layering on plants? Now, layering is a really interesting way to propagate plants. And when we talk about layering, we're talking about damaging the bark on a stem, wrapping it with peat, and then wrapping it around the outside with plastic and sealing it on either side. And what will happen is, from where the damage was done on the bark, if you've covered it completely and it's dark, you'll start seeing roots emerge. So it'll what they call callus, and then roots will emerge from the callus. And what that means is that if you let them fill all the peat up with root system, you can cut that branch off, take the plastic away and plant the new root system straight into the soil, and you've got yourself a brand new plant. The thing with it is that you can pretty much do it any time of the year, but there are some plants that are more responsive in the growing season. So any of the tropical plants, you're thinking of things like ficus, or there's a lot of people doing things at the moment with fiddle-leaf figs and things like that. That's when you would do it. But during the winter, some of the cooler climate plants, things like citrus, if you wanted to try with citrus, some of the things like rhododendrons, camellias, azaleas will all do well if you do it this time of the year. So I hope that helps you. Dorothy, I'm not sure where you're from, Dorothy, but you're looking for some tips on how to prune a miniature persimmon. Well, unless you need to reduce the size of the plant, I wouldn't reduce the persimmon's branches. I would leave it. I think it's one of those plants, if it's a dwarf, if it's miniature, it will stay nice and compact, and you'd only prune it to shape. Andrew, could you give me some tips on taking care of kangaroo paws? Well, right at the moment, Andrew, your kangaroo paws should be booming away. This is the time when they really do well. So you should see them growing. If you're not seeing good growth, you're not seeing emergence of flower buds about now's the time to feed them with a controlled release fertilizer. So you don't want something that's going to release too fast. You just want a steady, controlled release. So Osmocote is always a good thing to go to. Aruni is an apple cross. I've been adding coffee grounds to my veggie patch and pot plants. Is it not good for certain plants? The answer is coffee grounds, as a general comment, are just a soil amendment. They're actually very, very good. And there are certain plants or certain things like fungi, for example, that will grow straight out of the coffee ground. So I would suggest to you that just keep using them, but maybe don't let them get into a crusty kind of layer. Maybe try and incorporate them into the topsoil a little bit. And Aruni said that your favourite indoor plant is the orchid. Of course it is. How can you not fall in love with orchids? Anouk is in Western Sydney. I planted a number of bulbs, and it's in a relatively shallow planter, only about 6 to 7 inches deep. is there an ideal amount of soil needed beneath the bulbs? And also, what can I apply, not blood and bone, to promote flower production? Well, you're not going to promote flower production by applying fertilizers. It really needs to be the cooler conditions for the vast majority of bulbs. Now, there are some that originate from places like South Africa that will be triggered by light, not by cold as such. But when you're talking about feeding bulbs, I would only feed them after the flower's been produced, and then when that flower has been produced, I would remove it once it's finished, and I would feed the plant, and all the goodness will then go back down into the bulb and not into producing seed as a consequence of the flower being produced. Hopefully that helps. And the shallow planters, perfect for growing most bulbs in. Amanda's in Goulburn in New South Wales. Let's have a look and see what she's got. She wants to know, how often should I repot my indoor Phalaenopsis or Cymbidium orchids? Okay, so Phalaenopsis is the moth orchid. We were just talking about them before with Richard. Cymbidiums are very different. So they're a terrestrial orchid. Phalaenopsis typically would grow in the fork of tree trunks and stuff in the wild or on the side of a tree, but a Cymbidium would actually grow in the bark around the base of the tree. So with Phalaenopsis, you could repot them pretty much at any time, to be quite honest. But using a good potting mix for orchid plants and doing it after it's finished flowering is the ideal scenario. Cymbidiums is the same. So basically, you split your Cymbidium bulbs up when they've completed flowering. You repot them. So usually that's September, October, and they will start growing through the warmer months. And then in February, with Cymbidiums, what triggers the flowering is light. So you need to move them out towards the end of February into a really bright position, leave them out in that position probably all the way through to the end of March, and then bring them back in, and you will find that they are that they're going to produce bulbs. You'll see new stems coming from the little pseudo bulbs at the base, and those new stems are going to be flowers. Kelly is in Collie. Hello, Kelly. Philodendron, you've got a philodendron lickety split, which has just started to yellow. You've used slow release fertilizer and liquid feed as well, but what's happening here? But still, it's still yellowing. Should you repot it, or is it going to die? Your lickety split probably won't die. I think generally what you find is you need to give it a little bit of liquid fertilizer. I would suggest that probably a combination of liquid on a weekly basis is the ideal way to go, because if you're providing liquid fertilizers, they're only active for about 5 to 7 days. Once you've applied it, you should start to see it changing quite quickly. I'd be looking for one of those sort of something like Thrive that's a lot higher nitrogen, because lickety split really loves like nitrogen. So the greening elements. It really does. That particular philodendron lickety split does really love that a lot. So yeah. Okay, so what should we do next? I reckon we should go to the Garden Express offer of the week. I'm pretty excited about this one. And the reason is that in my garden, under the shade of trees, I can grow peony roses. And they have got this amazing deal on tree peonies. Now, if you don't know peonies, it's not a rose as such. It is actually a woody shrub, and there's a perennial form of it and a tree form. This is the tree form. This is the guys at Garden Express. They've got a peony rose collection. It's a mixed collection. You can save 20% off right now, $12.90. Normally it's $15.90. And they've also got great value collection of 4. So I think that's the $12.90 is for the single plant. And for the collection of 4, it's a saving of 25%. That's only $39.90, and that's the one that I will personally be going for, because they are just gorgeous. And I don't know if we got some. Did we put some photos up of those? No. Can I just show you? That's what we're talking about. That's what the flowers are like. They are just stunning, and they're fragrant. And this is a plant that is a real collector's item. They can live for a long period of time. My recommendation is you get the 4. $39.90. That's 25% off. They're regularly $53.20. Or if you just want to try one plant, take that other offer, which is 20% off, $12.90. Peony roses, they are just gorgeous. They're not true roses. They're a woody shrub. They're just one of those plants that a collector will fall in love with. Great thing about Garden Express is, of course, they deliver it direct to your doorstep. And in this crazy world where we're in lockdown all the time, now is the time to be ordering it and having it delivered to your home, to your doorstep, so that you can take it out and plant it in the garden. If you want to order them online at gardenexpress.com.au. Ideally, do it straight after the show because they never last long, these offers. Now, we've got a few more questions that we'll move through. Daniel is asking about Morea hedges. Sometimes they get dieback and start dying off with yellow leaves, and then the whole hedge dies off. Is this caused by stem borers? No, Daniel, this is actually a problem related to soil. I'm not sure where you are. You haven't told us, but I suspect that this is something we would typically see in coastal environments. So it's quite common in WA along the coast, places like the Mornington Peninsula, northern beaches of New South Wales, where you will see these plants suddenly turn yellow and start dying back. Now, the solution is to be getting trace elements into your soil, and you really do need to actually boost your soil quite significantly. These plants love iron, magnesium, manganese, all these vital trace elements which you can buy in a bag from your local garden centre. But when you buy it, sprinkle it around, be quite generous, and then scratch it into the surface of the soil, then water it in, and then keep your fertiliser up to the plant thereafter. That's the way to solve that problem with Moreas, because they are just one of the best hedges, but there is nothing worse than having a big long line of wonderful shrubs and one in the middle dies. So hopefully this helps you. Dennis is in the western suburbs of Sydney. G'day, Dennis. With mulch in winter, does it hold off cold or frost or hold in too much moisture? Is it okay to top up a bark mulch now? Mulching is a good thing. What it does do is it actually warms the soil a little bit, so it will protect the roots if they're near the surface. I think it's a really important thing from my point of view to mulch sort of during the early stages of winter, and then to repeat it again sort of November, January, so you're protecting the surface of the soil again, where a lot of the plant's roots grow is through the surface. So by putting mulch in during the summer, it's holding moisture. During the winter, it's keeping the ground warm. As a general comment, mulch is not going to hold too much moisture, so you should be fine, Dennis. I hope that helps. Anya, hello, Anya, and a big hello to you, or to us from you as well. Thank you. You love aeoniums. You're growing them indoors. You've got the purple, green growing in the same pot, and you love them because they make you smile. Good on you. That's fantastic. And you're also a big fan of maidenhair ferns, which you managed to save some from a neighbour. They are so delicate and beautiful, and they make your heart sing. That's really sweet, Anya. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Margaret is in Belgrave, Victoria. Now, you got given a kokedama. So beautiful. If you don't know that, that's it's a Japanese technique of basically wrapping the roots of an indoor plant, or a plant, doesn't have to be indoors, in peat, and then it's then tied, and this is then strung up and hung, and it looks amazing. But these plants do require a fair bit of care, and the one that you have is a rose, and I'm assuming that it's probably a miniature rose, I would think. The trick with kokedama is to make sure that when you get them, once a week, you take them off the point where they're hanging because they're exposed, and so they're drying all the time, and you drop it in a bucket of water. Now, when I'd put it into a bucket of water, I'd put it in a bucket of sea salt solution and some power feed in there, and I'd let it sit for a little while, soak it up, and I'd take it back out and I'd hang it once it had dried out. And that will give it a bit of a boost with feed, but most importantly, it'll also make sure that the plant is nice and moist. And it should only require this time of the year, probably one soaking like that a week. Daniel, I'm propagating new plants. Do you use hormone, liquid, or honey? Now, it is a bit of a trick. Some people do use honey, and it can be quite effective with certain plants. One of the good things about honey is it's antibacterial, antifungal, and when you wrap that around an open wound, it stops any fungus getting in and killing off the cutting. That's probably the primary benefit I think that you're getting from honey. When you're using a hormone, now you can get the classic is rooting hormone powder, but you can also get the gel. And rooting hormone is a really important thing when it comes to growing plants. So I would be going for the gel. It's sold as Clonex, and it's what professional propagators tend to use. It depends on the type of cutting you're taking too. So you'll have a look, you'll see there's two types. You probably, if you're going to have small, thin cuttings, then you're going to want to use something that is for semi-hardwood or for softwood. Or if you're going to go for something that's quite thick, like a big, thick stem, and that would be things like, at the moment, hydrangeas is a good example of something you grow like that. You want to use the hardwood rooting hormone gel, okay? Because rooting hormone powder is really effective, and it's what we used to use nowadays, but the gel acts just like the honey, and that'll seal it off. So if you're going to grow plants, yes, rooting hormone is really important. Okay, my plant of the week. I wanted to show these to you because they've come out of my garden, and I'm pretty proud of them. This is Camellia. This is a Camellia japonica. Now, have a look at those flowers. Aren't they just gorgeous? And the shrub is absolutely smothered in them. But they're not the only camellias. And this is sort of this pivotal time in my garden where you basically can have the 3 or 4 different types of camellias all in flower at the same time. So Camellia japonica, Japanese camellia. This one is the Sasanqua, which again is another Japanese type. These produce masses and masses of flower. These are the early camellia. So these will come into flower very early. They're a wonderful shrub. They're also brilliant for hedging. They can get quite tall at times and be smothered from top to bottom in flowers when they go into flower in the beginning of the camellia flowering season. Japonicas sit in the middle of it. And usually towards the end of the season, I've got an early form, you'll see these types. These are called reticulatas, and have a look at the size of that flower. It's almost as big as my hand. And when you've got, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 flowers on a bush, you can lose the foliage. They're just so big, they're so spectacular. And one of the nice effects of them when they've finished flowering is they drop their petals. You end up with beautiful big red or pink or white ground covering around the outside, which is just as pretty as well. So there's the 3 types of camellia, with reticulata probably being the rarest of the lot, these reticulatas. They come in all different types, sizes, and you can see just how beautiful the flowers are, and the big open flowers. And you see the little stamens of the flower on the inside there. They're absolutely gorgeous as well. Now, if you want to grow these plants and getting the best results, well, probably certainly in WA, it would be in a semi-shade position is my preference. They do grow in full sun here, but some of the varieties, some of the cultivars can be a little more sun sensitive. And the rule of thumb is that the lighter the flower, so if it's a white, the more likely it's going to get sunburned during the summer. If it's a darker colour, more of a red, they tend to do pretty well in full sun. If you're in somewhere like Victoria, even in South Australia, they'll do very well in full sun. If you're in places like the Blue Mountains in New South Wales, they're going to do very well right out in the open. And it doesn't matter whether it's a reticulata or whether it's a Sasanqua, they'll all perform pretty well out there. But when you're down in the city and it gets pretty hot, you really do want to have a little bit of protection if you can. So under the shade of a tree, ideally a deciduous tree, so that you get the foliage will drop, obviously, if the deciduous tree in the wintertime, but then you'll get the whole garden light up with these magnificent camellias. Camellias do originate from China and Japan, and most of the breeding's been done in Japan in the last 30 years or so, and that's the stuff that we're seeing in garden centres. So if you've got any questions about your camellias, now's the time to ask. And Andrew started off, wants to know, and it's a good point. So Andrew, typically Sasanquas can sort of maybe get to a maximum of 1.5 to 2 meters. There's some varieties that are a lot taller, and there's some dwarfs that only get to 500 mils, so they can be quite compact. So there's variation. Reticulatas, they tend to be more of a tree, a small tree. They'll end up getting to 3 meters. They'll be smothered in foliage. What you'll tend to find is the trunk itself, it's more tree-like, and they all obviously share this common, beautiful, big, glossy foliage. And when it comes to the majority of the japonicas, which is these ones here, they tend to be sort of 1.5 to 2 meter shrubs maximum. there are some really good, I'm asking for trouble here because there's some really good varieties that do get a little bit tall on that 2 meters, maybe even 3. But as a general comment, think about them as a plant that's going to get to around 2 meters in your garden. And when it is in flower, like these guys are here, there's one flower there, but you can see behind there's 2 buds. So there's 2 more flowers going to appear from there. From that flower, there's 1 more bud, and this is going to keep us in color all the way through the darkest days of winter. And basically, when we come into springtime, they start to rest a little bit. The flowers will finish and they move on. So how's that? Let's see if we've got any other questions. Remember, give us a like if you like what you're seeing today. Hopefully I answered your question, Andrew, with regards to the size. Christine's in Perth. Hello, Christine. Just a question on initiating flowers on Cymbidium orchids. I was told that dropping the temperature in the evenings during summer was the way to go, and that plants in the shade house with 50% shade cloth. Now, during the summer, that is moderating your temperatures is a good way to go. And certainly, I think Richard alluded to the fact that with Phalaenopsis, it's actually the temperature that triggers the flower. But with Cymbidium orchids, it's actually light that triggers the flower, and that light needs to come through, believe it or not, in February. And the risk, Christine, is that in February in somewhere like Perth, you couldn't stick a Cymbidium out in full sun without getting a fair bit of damage to your foliage. So what you want to do is have white shade cloth. Now, white shade cloth is different to dark shade cloth. Dark shade cloth is a true shade. It throws a dark shadow over the top of the plant and it cools it. But white reflects light and reflects light and heat off back out, but it also disperses it more evenly down in around the base of the plant, which is encouraging a wider, bushier growth and a more compact flower stem. So you still get nice flowers, coming out, but they're not quite as long as they might be in a dark shaded position. And sometimes if it's too dark, your Cymbidiums will produce lots of growth, but no flowers. Hopefully that answers that. Anouk has shared his favourite indoor plant. After being a black thumb to every other indoor plant, a friend gave me some cuttings for devil's ivy, which are thriving in various vases around the house. And of course, that's the other way to grow them, is in a vase of water. So that's your favourite because it's survived you. Well done, Anouk. That's really, really good. All right. Well, how have we gone? We are 10:53 over here in the west, nearly midday on the east coast, and nearly 1 o'clock on the east coast, and we have asked a lot of questions. Now we've chosen 6 winners of those Mr. Fothergill's packet seeds: Anouk, Anya, Aruni, Scott, Andrew, Christine. Thank you so much. And the winner of our book this week, The Rose, is Kelly from Collie in WA. Kelly, thank you so much for making your contribution, and for everybody for joining us again today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope you've enjoyed some of the plants we've talked about. Don't forget, if you have not grown peonies before, get your hands on some peony roses. They are beautiful, and the way to do it is to go to gardenexpress.com.au. Now, if you've got any questions, remember you can always ask them on our Facebook page. We will always answer them. Love answering them during the show, and we'll be back next week to do it all over again. So if you want to hold your questions to then, don't forget it. Make sure you join us on Channel 9 this Sunday for the last episode. Oh, no. In fact, it's on 9 Life. You will find the last episode of our Explore TV Norfolk Island. Remember, you can also listen back to today's session via a live stream. You can do it from our Facebook page. You can also get previous episodes and this episode from Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Audible. And I'm really looking forward to joining you again next week at 12 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time as we answer more of your questions and showcase some more great gardens. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Trevor Cochrane. Happy gardening. Have a great week.
Visit the Garden Guru's online store and browse through a collection of high-quality, German-made Wolfgarten tools. You'll also find a range of books with information to help create and maintain a beautiful garden. You can also access the online store on the Garden Guru's Facebook page.
This live stream is brought to you by Still and Evergreen Garden Care. Still is Australia's most trusted brand of garden power tools, backed by 95 years of German engineering excellence. To get your hands on their range, visit your local Still dealer today or visit still.com.au. Evergreen Garden Care and their market-leading brands are some of the best known and trusted consumer brands within the garden care market. To be inspired and easily create and maintain your garden, head to lovethegarden.com.
Garden Express are Australia's leading mail-order gardening service, offering a wide range of quality garden products. Each week on the Garden Gurus Live, the team at Garden Express will share a weekly offer. So make sure after today's show you jump online and visit their website.